In the spring of 2025, the world was still carrying scars. The pandemic years had left entire cities fractured, communities divided, and hearts burdened by grief. People walked through their daily routines with an invisible weight pressing on them, as though healing was something reserved for others, something distant, impossible. Dr. Alara Vance never imagined she would stand at the center of what people began to call the healing. She was not a politician or a spiritual leader, just a physician from Chicago who had spent the last decade fighting to keep people alive. But what she saw in her patients went beyond medicine. Fear carved deep lines into their faces, loneliness tightening their chests, despair silencing their voices. Pills and charts could only go so far. What people needed was wholeness, not just survival. When her hospital launched a pilot program in January 2025, Alara volunteered to lead. The idea was simple but radical: combine medical care with community storytelling, art therapy, and shared rituals of remembrance. Patients were invited not just to describe their symptoms, but to share their stories, of loss, of endurance, of longing. Each session ended not with prescriptions, but with moments of silence, music, and gentle words reminding them they were not alone. At first, skepticism was loud. This isn't medicine, critics argued. It's sentiment. But in quiet rooms, something extraordinary began to unfold. People who hadn't spoken in months found themselves painting their grief in shades of blue and gold. Veterans of intensive care units wrote letters to strangers who had survived similar battles. Mothers who had lost children planted trees in a shared garden, their roots intertwining beneath the soil. Slowly, pain began to loosen its grip. By summer, the program had grown beyond the hospital. Parks became gathering spaces where citizens practiced communal breathing at dawn. Schools invited grandparents to share memories of resilience with children who had only known uncertainty. Even city councils adopted healing hours, where grievances were aired through dialogue and song rather than silence or anger. Healing was no longer just a word, it was a practice, an atmosphere, a choice repeated each day. Alara often found herself walking through these circles quietly, unnoticed, listening to laughter return to places once hollow. She remembered one boy, Mateo, who had lost his father during the pandemic. He once refused to speak, staring only at the ground. In the spring garden, he pressed a seed into the soil and whispered, "This is for him." Months later, when the first bloom appeared, he smiled, a small, fragile smile, but one that carried more weight than any medicine ever could. By the end of 2025, no one claimed the world was perfect. There were still conflicts, injustices, and wounds too deep to mend in a single season. Yet something had shifted. Healing was no longer seen as an endpoint, but as a continuous journey people walked together. And in that shared journey, scars no longer defined them, they became reminders of survival, proof that brokenness could be remade into beauty.